Tonight on Primetime, Ukraine has taken the war deeper into Russia, striking warehouses belonging to the country's largest online retailer, as Kyiv intensifies attacks on logistics it believes supports Moscow's war effort. At the same time, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has appointed a new commander-in-chief amid growing domestic pressure and military reshuffles. Is Ukraine entering a new phase, both on the battlefield and at home? Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Primetime. I'm your host, Katie Wilson. Ukraine has struck the warehouses of Russia's top online retailer, Wildberries, as it continues to target logistics and military sites in the border regions. It comes as President Zelenskyy appoints a new commander-in-chief of Ukraine's military in the face of widespread public protests.
Drone attacks have struck warehouses belonging to Wildberries, Russia's largest online retailer. That's according to local officials. The company confirmed its logistics centres in Krasnodar and Novinomysk were attacked on Wednesday, injuring several people. The attacks followed earlier Ukrainian drone strikes on Wildberries logistics hubs in Kotovsk and Elektrostal on Saturday, killing 8 workers and disrupting operations which handles more than 20 million orders a day. The Kremlin denies Ukrainian accusations that Wildberries handles military supplies for Russia's war effort. It also warns against any deployment of European or NATO troops to Ukraine, calling a potential move unacceptable to Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses intercepted and destroyed 209 Ukrainian fixed-wing drones over the Moscow region, Russian-occupied Crimea, the Sea of Azov, and the Black Sea. In Russia's Belgorod region, local officials said Ukrainian attacks over the past 24 hours killed 9 people and injured 77 others. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russian forces would continue striking vessels carrying equipment, weapons, and other military supplies to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced a major military leadership change. He said Major General Mikhailo Drapati would become Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, replacing Oleksandr Syrsky. The appointment comes as part of a wider reshuffle of Ukraine's military leadership, following the resignation of former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov last week and several days of protests in the country.
Well, over in Ukraine, President Zelenskyy has named a young Major General as the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's military. It's after days of street protests marking the biggest shake-up in the country's military leadership since Russia's full-scale invasion.
Ukraine's top military commander Oleksandr Syrsky has been dismissed by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has appointed General Mikhailo Drapati as the new commander-in-chief. The decision follows days of nationwide protests after Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov was removed from his post last week. Reports suggested growing disagreements between Fedorov and Syrsky over the direction of the armed forces. That government reshuffle led to a political crisis that analysts say exposed weaknesses in Ukraine's domestic governing due to the lack of elections during the war. Fedorov had been defense minister since January and was widely credited with modernizing the military and tackling corruption. However, in his evening address, Zelenskyy said that he had offered Fedorov a decent post to oversee the technological component of the state.
I had a meeting with Mikhailo Fedorov today. I offered Mikhailo a worthy position in the government, which would allow unity of the technological component of our state to ensure its development.
Syrsky, meanwhile, faced criticism from some who viewed his leadership style as outdated. Zelenskyy appeared to respond to growing public pressure by replacing him with Drapati, a younger battlefield commander seen as more open to military reform. Zelenskyy thanked Syrsky for helping defend Kyiv during the early stages of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. The changes come at a critical stage of the war, with Ukraine seeking to strengthen its armed forces and improve coordination on the battlefield.
Well, Zelensky's decision to appoint a new commander-in-chief of Ukraine's military comes after 6 days of protests across the country. He said the decision was made to reset Ukraine's defence against Russian forces. Here's the story behind the shake-up.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy has replaced his top general, marking the biggest shake-up in Ukraine's armed forces since the full-scale war began.
I determined that the new commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine will be Mikhailo Drapati. Together with Mikhailo, we determined how the configuration of the general staff should be updated.
43-year-old Major General Mikhailo Drapati replaces 60-year-old Alexander Syrsky, who faced mounting criticism over a rigid Soviet-style command blamed for high troop casualties. Drapati represents a younger generation with a sharply different approach, but changing the top commander during an active war has polarized a war-weary public.
Zelenskyy heard the protesters. I support Syrsky's dismissal, and Drapati's appointment was the right choice. I expect positive changes.
It seems to me that Zelenskyy did not hear the protesters, and I think it was a major mistake to dismiss Syrsky. This will have a significant impact on Ukraine.
Beyond domestic politics, analysts view Drapati's appointment as a strategic pivot based on three key factors. First, his tactical approach. Drapati openly supported the recently dismissed reformist defense minister, advocating for rapid drone integration and decentralized command, bringing the army closer to NATO standards. Second, his battlefield record. He is credited with stabilizing critical fronts, notably halting a Russian advance near Kyiv last summer. Third, his strict stance on accountability. Following a Russian strike that killed 12 soldiers at a training center in June 2025, Drapati resigned. He stated that an army where commanders do not bear personal responsibility for troop casualties is dying from within. This command shift comes as Washington and Brussels closely monitor Kyiv's management of its military resources. Drapati takes charge with solid domestic backing. A recent Socius poll gives him a 38.5% trust rating, making him one of Ukraine's most trusted active commanders.
Well, joining us now is Marco Soronha, retired Lieutenant General of the Portuguese Armed Forces. Thank you for being with us. Now, Ukraine is targeting logistics hubs deep inside Russia. How significant is this of a shift in Kyiv's military strategy?
Good afternoon. Many thanks for having me today. So let's see. It's a change that the Ukrainian forces have started several months ago. So trying to target and to hit first, as we have seen the oil industry in first place, and second place the industrial base of defense. All the factories that are producing components or producing drones or producing missiles and other stuff linked to the defense, and lastly but not least, the main military logistic hubs that are supporting the front line, and all of those infrastructures are located very inside in deep in Russia. So it's something that altogether put a lot of pressure in the military logistics system of Russia, and the main thing is that destruction starting to produce effects in the front line. That's the main problem now that Russia is experiencing. So it's something that have a little bit turned the tide concerning the dynamics of Russia in the front line that have almost stopped in the last 2.5 months, more or less. So and the main cause it's identified. It's the lack of logistics. That's and of course the issues with manpower also. But especially the logistics of the Russians in the front line are very, very weak. And in some places, namely in Kherson, it's almost zero. So it's almost locked, all the logistic chain.
And is that something you think we're going to see more, sort of both sides increasingly targeting logistics rather than frontline positions? How significant of a target has logistics systems become?
Logistics, as we say in the military, does not win a war, but without logistics we can lose a war. So the operational side is important to have a success and victory in the war. But the lack of logistics is something that without that we are not going to succeed. So this change is mainly due to the fact that the technology of the Ukrainian side have been able to target all the lines of the logistics system. So in very much in the rear, in deep, the factories, the depots of fuel and oil and so on, the factories, and after the main hubs. And the hubs are air bases that outer routes, all the system that provides the capability to put the things in the front line. So and the Ukraine is able to target all those lines with in the logistics in the front line until 150 kilometers from the front line with the drones and the small drones and the FPV drones and so on. After that, with the bigger drones and missiles, and with missiles, especially the flamingos and so on, all the deep targeting in the deep, so of Russia. So it's something that and the targeting also of the railways and all the system, because the Russians used a lot of railways to take the things from the rear side to the front line. So all that system, targeting system, logistic targeting system, almost blockade all the system. So it's a risk that in some parts, in Kherson, inside Crimea, because Crimea is almost locked, the Russian forces could have a collapse due to the fact that they are not having logistical support. Logistical support is fuel, is food, it's ammunition, it's a lot of things that are not coming in due time to the front line. So it's something that is worrying the Russian leadership, and that is due to the fact that the update of the technological effects of Ukraine are now very much in line with all this success that they are having in the not only in the front line but in the rear as.
And what more do we know about this particular incident? We've got Russia insisting that these were civilian facilities, but Ukraine says that they support the military. What more do we know about this?
Let's see. We have two kind of targets in this case. So normally the Ukraine was targeting and eating the factories, and the factories we can say that could be civilian, but that are factories that are producing military material, so or military components, microchips and so on, and all the technologies needed to assemble missiles or other systems. So that's one thing. The other thing is this thing that happened with oil barrels, a kind of Russian Amazon, and that it's something that it's a scheme that the Ministry of Defense of Russia was and still is using that to import things, technical components that are under sanctions. So it's a way that we normally do in our house to buy something in the internet and coming by a delivery system, civilian delivery system. And so this Wildberry company has two big depots where they put together all those systems, and Ukraine eating that. So what we can say under the international humanitarian law is that this kind of infrastructure, if they are using military stuff or military is operating them, could be a legal military target. Or what seems to be the case with the depots of Wildberry. And so it's more or less the same that the Russians are doing in Ukraine. The Russians are eating lots of not only military infrastructure, but civilian infrastructure, houses, and so on. But in the case of Ukraine, I suppose that all those targets are linked to the military effort of the Russian armed forces.
And let's talk more about the Ukrainian strategy. President Zelenskyy has replaced his commander-in-chief, and Drapatyi, he's earned a reputation as one of Ukraine's most capable battlefield commanders. What does this tell us about Ukraine's armed forces? What message could this send to Russia? But also, what sort of changes in operational planning or battlefield tactics could we expect under this new leadership?
Let's see. We have experience in the Ukrainian forces this transformation and this putting more focus, operational and strategic focus, in the precision deep strikes. So it's something that, and for that, the Ukrainians make very good use of technology. They produce the missiles and so on. So that is very much linked with the dynamics of Fedorov, the defense minister, that in the past was the minister of the digital transformation and all the technologies. So it's something that they put working directly to the Ukrainian armed forces, and that produced the change that we are seeing now in the ground. Syrskyi was and it's something that we said when you said just a few minutes ago, that Syrskyi is very much from the Soviet school, so very much mass and big formations and so on. Syrskyi was very much criticized sometimes when the Ukrainian armed forces lose a lot of people in some battles, Pokrovsk and others, Avdiivka and others, operations where the Ukraine lost, and the Russians also, but attrition operations. And I suppose that now the overall military strategy of Ukraine is changing to a more flexible use of human resources and a lot of use of technologies that can break the logistic chain, and trying to have more movement in the front line, trying to disrupt the Russian formations in the front line. If they are going to have success, we will see. But the most important that it was needed to change some of the mindset of the leadership of the intermediate and upper echelons of the Ukrainian armed forces. Let's see if it works. Everybody thinks so, that the war is changing, and so for the change of the war and the change of the strategy, we need some new leaderships. And of course, we know it was public, the clash between Fedorov and Syrskyi, and that is not good. The Minister of Defense is clashing with the chief of the armed forces. So it's something that Zelenskyy has to solve. He tried to solve in one way. It didn't work because Fedorov was very much supported by the population. So it's politics working. Let's see about the effects, but I suppose that will work.
Now, our viewers were just seeing pictures earlier of the public protests and the political pressure that Zelenskyy was facing to make this change. How important is it for Ukraine, for the public, to have confidence in their military leadership for sustaining that war effort after more than 4 years of fighting?
Let's see. It's very important because one of the main points now it's the Ukrainian population resilience and people to resist, because they are going to experience hard times. The lack of air defenses in Kyiv and other cities, and the use of the Russians with the ballistic and hypersonic missiles are going to provoke a lot of things, bad things inside the Ukrainian cities. And so the population have to resist, have to be resilient, and for that have to have confidence in their military that are in the front line or are using the military assets to conduct the war. So it's something that should be balanced, and it's up to the political leadership to try to construct and to build a scheme where the political side of the government, the Rada Duma, the parliament, and the armed forces and all the defense structure should be balanced and in line with the strategy that is approved by Zelensky and by the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the Armed Forces, of course. So it's something that happened. We cannot forget that this is almost 5 years of war. So the leaderships are some of them are at 3-4 years in the same position. So sometimes reshuffling it's mandatory. So it's something that happens everywhere. We can see that even in the United States. So it's normal.
All eyes on those developments there then. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General, for joining us on the programme and for providing your analysis.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
After the break, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is heading to Damascus for his first visit to Syria since taking office. It comes as the international community looks to support the country's fragile political transition. Could this landmark visit help turn cautious optimism into lasting stability? Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres will travel to Syria later this week for his first visit to the country since taking office. He's due to meet President Ahmed al-Shara and other officials in Damascus. Ahead of the trip, the UN Secretary-General's representative on Syria told the Security Council there are signs of hope for the country's future.
Despite the challenges underscored by security incidents, economic hardship, and unresolved local tensions, the opportunities for Syria are real if institutions are built that are inclusive, accountable, and capable of delivering for all Syrians, building confidence across Syria's diverse communities. Sustained commitment from the international community, including this Council, will remain critical.
Well, joining us now to discuss what the visit could mean for Syria's future is Middle East analyst Xavier Rachel Blanchard. Thank you for joining us. Now, Antonio Guterres is making his first visit to Syria as the UN Secretary-General. How significant is this moment for the country's international rehabilitation?
Well, I think this visit is an absolute landmark visit. It's the first visit of the United Secretary-General to Syria in 2009. And of course, throughout the whole war in Syria, the whole country during the rule of the Assad regime was isolated from the international community. As you've seen in recent times, since the fall of the Assad regime, the new president of Syria, he has met with Donald Trump. There has been sanctions relief from Syria, and recently, I believe, was the visit of French President Macron. So all of these things, they all add up to rejoining the world stage. And now with the visit of Guterres to Damascus, that makes even more the case. And of course, the United Nations support for the transitional government in Syria is also very important.
And the UN says that Syria has a real opportunity to move forward. You've kind of indicated that there, but they say if it builds inclusive and accountable institutions, what could be the biggest obstacles that stand in the way of that transition?
Well, of course, actually there are many obstacles that are facing. Of course, it's not for the transitional government to bring the population together. There's so much that has happened to different factors and different sectors of the Syrian society. I believe that's why the United Nations is calling for inclusivity in the new Syrian government, and that's a very difficult thing to achieve because I mean, there's a lot of different, sectarianism remains an issue in this country. And in order to satisfy all of the different actors, all of the different groups that are within the country, and at the same time maintain stability, that's going to be a very difficult task. And that's a task that the international help will definitely be appreciated.
You've touched on maintaining stability there. How vulnerable is Syria's transition to extremist activity or renewed violence?
Well, there is some vulnerability. So, of course, you've seen many people have heard about the issues that happened on the Syrian coast after the fall of the Assad regime, and also in Sweden in the south. And you can consider a lot of these be internal problems. However, there is definitely foreign, how can I say, meddling that's happening in Syria. You can see in the south, which is where the UN Secretary General is visits on his trip to Syria, which I think is very important, by the way. You can see that Israel continues to occupy an increasingly large amount of Syrian territory, and there's been issues with the local population in these areas as well. This is definitely something that affects regional stability and Syrian stability, of course. So this is something that I hope that the United States will be able to help address. I mean, as we saw with the issues that were happening in Sweden province last year, Israel actually bombed Damascus, central Damascus, a place that myself I go to very regularly. I mean, I live in Aleppo, not in Damascus, but still, these are very central locations, and such action only disrupts the potential internal stability of Syria, but will also affect investors. Are they going to be willing to put money into projects in Syria? Such issues still happen in the country. So all of these things are related when coming to the future of the country.
And what about al-Shara as a leader? You've kind of touched upon how he is breaking out of that diplomatic isolation with these high-profile international visitors. How equipped do you think he is to deal with these issues around him?
I mean, I think he's definitely an intelligent leader. I think in many cases he's saying a lot of the right things. However, this is not an easy task. That the Syrian government does want stability in the country. Of course they do. This is not an easy task, especially for a country that's coming out of so many years of violence. On top of that, with all of these international issues as well. So yeah, international relations of the new government are definitely to help, and it also will bring legitimacy to the government.
Mm-hmm. And what about the security sector then? How important is security sector reform in preventing that instability that you discussed earlier?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yeah, so how important is security sector reform in fighting against that instability that you discussed earlier?
I definitely think it's important. I think the government definitely needs to focus on the rule of law in the country. I think that there are many outdated laws even in the country, which I think should be changed in order to increase accountability for crimes. Of course, with the transitional justice system, you're also seeing many Assad-era war criminals that have been caught, and some have been put on trial. However, some are still also out in public, and there aren't really clear answers as to why this is the case. So yeah, I do believe that these things are important, and maintaining peace in the country. As I said, it's a difficult task because you have to balance so many factors and so many different sectors of the society at the same time.
It's been really great to have your analysis on that issue. All eyes on the visit there. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme and for providing your insight.
Thank you. You're welcome.
After the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe, so do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The UK's new Prime Minister Andy Burnham has unveiled another major policy announcement promising to cap most bus fares in England at £2 from next year. That's just under $3 US. Our correspondent Zainab Farajzadeh reports from Manchester.
Andy Burnham's third day as Prime Minister has brought another cost of living pledge, with the government announcing that most single bus fares in England will be capped at £2 from January next year. The government says the policy will cost more than £500 million, funded by relocating money from other departments, and insists it will place no additional burden on taxpayers. Here in Manchester, the announcement carries particular significance as Mayor Burnham introduced the B network, bringing buses back under local control for the first time since the 1980s. Greater Manchester already has a £2 fare cap, while the new national scheme targets areas where private operators still set fares.
So I think it will really help people with the cost of living pressures they're facing. It's there for the whole of 2027, and I think it will put money in people's pockets. The public's priority is reducing cost of living pressures, and that's what I'm doing. I'm taking a difficult look at some of the things that the government was committed to, digital ID being one example, and reprioritising.
The bus fare cap is the latest in a series of early policy announcements from Burnham's new government. On Tuesday, he pledged to remove VAT from household electricity bills for 6 months starting in October, describing his administration as a cost-of-living government. In his first speech as Prime Minister, Burnham also promised to end rough sleeping, build more council homes, and reform education to help more young people into work. Also, further details on those plans are still expected. Just 3 days into his premiership, attention is already turning to how the government will deliver on those promises in the months ahead. Zainab Farajzadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
French lawmakers have approved a landmark social media ban for children under 15, delivering on a key pledge by President Emmanuel Macron. The law takes effect on the 1st of September. Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, with this new legislation, France becomes the first European country to bring in age controls for social media. It's something that had broad cross-party support in the Senate and the National Assembly. It's an issue that's been worrying parents and politicians. Children under 15 doom scrolling, often late at night, the impact on children's learning capabilities, the knock-on effects of reduced attention spans at school, cyberbullying, access to inappropriate adult content, fake news, manipulated videos, and AI content as well. President Macron has made social policy one of his flagship pledges for this, his final year in office. Last week, French lawmakers approved legalizing assisted dying, and this week they have approved bringing in a social media ban. It will start from the beginning of the next academic year, so from the 1st of September, the under 15s won't be able to open an account on a platform like TikTok, Snapchat or Instagram. And from January next year, all existing accounts will also be impacted by the ban. There are some concerns, however, that were raised by lawmakers and civil society organisations to ensure that there is no impact on personal privacy when carrying out age verification, and also concerns about how to enforce this ban and make sure that children aren't simply using systems such as virtual private networks to circumvent the legislation. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
The humanitarian crisis in Sudan is deepening, with the United Nations warning that hundreds of thousands of displaced people are now facing emergency levels of hunger. Our correspondent Naba Mahideen has more from Khartoum.
The humanitarian situation in Sudan continues to deteriorate, with the United Nations warning that nearly 400,000 displaced people in North Kordofan are facing emergency levels of hunger. The UN says ongoing fighting in districts like Shekan, Bara, and West Bara is making it increasingly difficult for families to access food and basic services. Aid agencies say they are struggling to meet growing needs as funding falls far short of requirements. The UN humanitarian appeal for Sudan remains less than half funded, limiting the amount of assistance that can reach those most in need. The World Food Programme has also warned that severe funding shortages are forcing it to limit the amount of food despite the growing crisis and the ongoing humanitarian crises in the country. The UN is urging the international community to increase funding and also secure safe humanitarian passages, warning that without urgent action, the humanitarian situation in Sudan will continue to deteriorate across the country, and of course it will impact millions of people in war zones and also in relatively calm areas. Naba Muhiddin for News, Khartoum, Sudan.
Kazakhstan's oil exports are facing fresh uncertainty after the Caspian Pipeline Consortium reportedly stopped accepting crude. Reports from Reuters say the move follows a series of drone attacks near the consortium's marine terminal. Fariza Kalamerzina reports from Almaty.
The Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which handles around 80% of Kazakhstan's oil exports, has stopped accepting crude after a series of drone attacks near its marine terminal in Novorossiysk, according to Reuters. The news agency, citing 3 industry sources, says the decision follows repeated attacks on oil tankers operating near the terminal. 5 vessels have reportedly been targeted in the area since the beginning of July, raising concerns over the security of maritime operations. And according to Bloomberg, the disruption is not the result of damage to the pipeline itself. Instead, tankers are staying away from the terminal because of the security risks, leaving exports temporarily at a standstill. The situation is being closely watched by Chevron, which owns a 15% stake in the consortium. Kazakhstan's foreign and energy ministries have condemned the attacks, calling them strikes against international energy infrastructure. Ukraine's ambassador to Kazakhstan, Viktor Maiko, said that drone attacks on tankers carrying Kazakh oil do not serve Ukraine's interests. And as uncertainty over the country's main export route continues, Kazakhstan is accelerating plans to expand domestic refining. The government is increasing the capacity of its 3 existing refineries and is also studying the construction of a new refinery capable of processing up to 10 million tons of crude a year. Fariza Kalamerzina, Almaty, A-News.
Belarus and Kyrgyzstan are looking to deepen their partnership, with cooperation expanding beyond diplomacy and into trade, energy and education. Belarus's foreign minister is in Bishkek for talks aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Belarusian Foreign Minister Maxim Ryzhenkov is paying an official visit to Kyrgyzstan, where he is holding talks with his counterpart Jinbek Kurubayev on expanding political, economic and humanitarian cooperation. The ministers discussed preparation for this year's Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Bishkek, cooperation within international organizations, and plans to hold the second Global Mountain Summit in the Kyrgyz capital in 2027, to which Belarus has been invited. The two sides reviewed opportunities to increase trade, expand industrial cooperation, develop joint food production projects, and strengthen collaboration in agriculture and education. Belarus also reaffirmed its readiness to train more Kyrgyz students, including in engineering disciplines. Cooperation is also expanding in the energy sector. Kyrgyz Energy Minister Altenberg Rizbekov says the first shipment of fuel and lubricants from Belarus have already arrived, with additional railway deliveries on the way under a new fuel import agreement. Our soldiers have resolved transit issues through Russia and are also securing fuel supplies from China and Uzbekistan to diversify imports and strengthen the country's energy security. The visit comes as bilateral ties continue to strengthen. In June, the two countries signed 12 cooperation agreements covering trade, education, culture, business, and social policy, while setting a goal of increasing bilateral trade to $500 million by 2030. It is Steven Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
After the break, we'll take a look at other top stories making headlines today from around the world. Stay with us. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. As US strikes on Iran enter an 11th day, the Pentagon is coming under growing scrutiny over both the strategy and cost of the campaign. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has been facing questions from lawmakers in Congress as he now seeks new funding.
US President Donald Trump says Washington could soon launch a major strike on Iran's underground Pickaxe Mountain nuclear facility, while Tehran has warned that any such attack would mark a dangerous escalation and make US and allied interests across the region legitimate targets. The US military says it has completed its 11th straight day of strikes on Iran, targeting what it describes as military infrastructure across the country. Video released by US Central Command showed what it said were airstrikes and surveillance footage from the operation. According to CENTCOM, the targets included military command centers, aircraft hangars, drone storage sites, maritime capabilities, and logistics facilities. CENTCOM also accused Iran of attacking more than 30 commercial vessels in the strategic waterway, saying those attacks have endangered civilian crews and disrupted freedom of navigation. In Washington, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told lawmakers that the military campaign has now cost an estimated $37.5 billion. Appearing before the Senate Appropriations Committee, Hegseth defended the operation while several senators questioned the rising cost of the campaign and the direction of US leadership in the conflict.
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Meanwhile, residents in Tehran reported hearing explosions overnight as Iran activated air defense systems over the capital, according to the semi-official Fars news agency. The conflict is also threatening regional shipping. Yemen's Houthi movement has warned that vessels trading with Saudi ports could be targeted, marking a potential escalation of its maritime campaign. Following the warning, 2 oil tankers carrying Saudi crude to Asia reversed course in the Red Sea, fueling concerns that the US-Iran conflict could spread into another front.
Meanwhile, Iran says its interior minister's visit to Pakistan is focused on bilateral ties rather than a ceasefire proposal. Taras Shiralilu brings us more from Tehran.
Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni's ongoing visit to neighboring Pakistan is mainly to pursue bilateral agreements. The ministry spokesman said the visit was scheduled before the Israeli-US war with Iran, and that discussions on the war may be raised because Pakistan is one of the mediators between Iran and the United States. In an interview with A News, however, he did not confirm reports that the Interior Minister was discussing the ongoing conflict with the US.
Pakistan is a mediator in the war between Iran and the US, but the Interior Minister is not carrying an official message from Tehran to Islamabad on the ceasefire. If this topic is raised in the meetings, the Iranian delegation will relay it to Foreign Ministry and Presidential Office.
Speaking at a press conference, the spokesman also stressed that Iran will continue attacking infrastructure in neighboring countries hosting US bases used to attack Iran's non-military installations. Zaini Vand stated that Iran's arsenal is full and Tehran is ready to launch wide-ranging responses. The Deputy Interior Minister stressed that Iran's security forces are determined to destroy terror cells along the borders. He said that Iran has signed security agreements with neighboring countries and is in high-level contacts with them to stop cross-border infiltration of terrorist elements. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
Now, a centuries-old culinary tradition shared by Azerbaijan and Turkey is seeking global recognition. The two countries have jointly applied to UNESCO to add the art of making baklava to its intangible cultural heritage list. Here's more.
Azerbaijan and Turkey have jointly applied to UNESCO to recognize the traditional art of making baklava as part of the world's intangible cultural heritage. The nomination, titled The Art of Making Baklava and Its Cultural Practices, highlights the shared cultural roots, rich heritage, and close ties between Azerbaijan and Turkey. The application presents the dessert under both the names baklava and paklava, describing it as a shared culinary tradition between the two countries. A final decision is expected during UNESCO's 21st session, which will take place in Xiamen, China, from November 30th to December 5th. For generations, the art of making baklava has been passed down from one generation to the next in both Azerbaijan and Turkey. More than just a dessert, baklava is an important part of Nowruz celebrations, religious holidays, family gatherings, and other special occasions. It reflects hospitality, creativity, and the tradition of bringing people together. In Azerbaijan, several regional varieties are well known, including those from Baku, Ganja, Guba, and Sheki baklava. Joint nominations like this are common under UNESCO's 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. When the same cultural tradition exists in more than one country, UNESCO encourages countries to submit a shared nomination. If approved, UNESCO will recognize and help safeguard the traditional knowledge, skills, and cultural practices associated with making baklava as part of the world's living heritage.
I'm feeling hungry now. And finally this evening, 9 months after a multi-million-dollar jewel theft exposed security weaknesses at the Louvre, France's most iconic gallery has reopened its doors.
Visitors are once again stepping inside the Louvre's Apollo Gallery, nearly 9 months after it closed following one of the museum's most audacious thefts. The gallery has reopened without the French crown jewels that were once its main attraction. Instead, visitors are being invited to rediscover one of the Louvre's most celebrated historic rooms and its richly decorated architecture. The crown jewels, including the famed Regent diamond, will eventually go on display in a dedicated high-security exhibition space elsewhere in the museum. Until then, work is continuing to prepare the new gallery. Outside the museum, visitors welcomed the reopening, while hoping lessons had been learned from last year's theft.
Well, it's surprising that it happened at all. I was shocked when I heard it happened. I don't know what they did over 9 months. Hopefully they increased security, but we'll see when we enter shortly.
Others said relocating the collection made sense if it meant better protecting some of France's most valuable treasures.
I think it is good that they have moved it because, I mean, if they put it back in the same place, what's stopping them from coming back and getting it again? So.
The Apollo Gallery was closed after thieves used a mover's lift to reach a second-floor window, smashed display cases, and escaped with 8 pieces from the crown jewels collection in less than 7 minutes. Most of the stolen jewels remain missing, although a crown belonging to Empress Eugenie was later recovered damaged and is being restored. 4 people suspected of direct involvement in the robbery have been charged and placed in custody while the investigation continues.
That's all we've got time for on Primetime this evening. From all of us here in the studio, thank you for watching and have a safe, restful evening. Good night.